Hey everyone, it's Joelle at Brooklyn Book Doctor. I am super excited today to be talking with Sebene Selassie. She is an author, speaker, and a meditation teacher in the Insight meditation tradition. Yes, that's right. And she is in the exciting position of having a book coming out this August 2020. And it's an incredibly timely book. It's called You Belong. It's about how we all belong, no matter where we come from, what our culture, what our social circumstances, good or bad, up or down, left or right, black, brown, white, yellow, whoever we are. And she's a wonderful speaker, writer, and thinker. So I'm super happy to have her here. Today, we're going to talk about procrastination and perfectionism, which is something that all writers know something about. But Sebene has just been through the whole process of writing a book. So she knows a lot about it right now, firsthand, fresh in her mind. So we're going to chat about how that went. So Sebene, I'm so happy you're here. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Joelle. It's great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So maybe just let's start with the basics of your process. So you wrote this book, and now you're reviewing galleys. When you were writing the book, did you already have a good sense of your writing process and know, like, okay, I tend to procrastinate, that's part of my creative process, or I tend to like hold on to every word, that's part of my process? Did you have a sense of that going into the project?
I've never written something this length before. So my experience with writing was really writing a blog and a newsletter, which was um, barely consistent, let's say. So I would go through periods where I would write a lot for that, but it didn't really require kind of a sustained effort. So actually writing the proposal in your book proposal academy was the first time that I really sustained a writing practice, putting together a 60 some page proposal, probably since school, like writing papers in grad school. And so I had to really discover my own kind of method and process for writing a book, something much longer and taking more sustained effort. And it was a real discovery process. I sort of had ideas about how I would just kind of sit down and everything would suddenly flow,
Mhm.
which is our fantasy idea as a writer, maybe. But really, I found that I could only write at specific times of the day. I could only write for really short amounts of time in terms of formal writing, like sitting down and opening Scrivener and writing chapters. But I was writing all day and all throughout. My process really involved reading, taking notes, finding scraps of paper, having a few designated pages in my notebook where I worked out ideas or when thoughts came to me. I had to learn that if a thought came to me, I had to put it down, because if I didn't, I would forget. I would convince myself sometimes when I wasn't near a pen or didn't feel like taking my phone out for writing down notes. I started using voice memos a lot as well. I would think that I would remember it, like, oh, this idea is so good, I'll remember it. And it's just not the case. It's really hard when we're in such a complex process like writing a book to keep all of those ideas. Um, so I really saw all of that as my writing process, right? Not just the act of sitting down.
That's so helpful to hear that, because I think, like you say, there is this idea that we're just going to sit down and it's just going to pour out. And if that doesn't happen, then there's a feeling of, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. I'm not qualified to be a writer or write a book or be an author. We disqualify ourselves in the surprise of what it might actually look like to write a book.
Yeah, and for me, I really had this idea that I would write for a few hours every day. And I found that actually the formal process of, again, opening Scrivener and writing chapters I could only really sustain that at most 4 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week. I would, I discovered that I needed to write super early. Like I had to get up at 5 or 5:30, and that special writing time was really good for maybe 2 hours tops. And then everything else, the printing out, the rereading, the notes, the kind of gathering ideas, the reading and inspiration part of it would kind of take the rest of the morning or the day or the week. Then when I got closer to the end, because I was on deadline, the 3 to 4 days turned in 4 to 5 days. But I also really needed time off. Like I needed a couple of days to not be in the formal writing process, to kind of let my mind rest. And I didn't expect that. I thought I would be able to kind of sit down for longer, but after it was such intense work that after about 90 minutes to 2 hours, I couldn't really sustain it anymore.
In that time when you were like, I have to stop, this is not productive anymore, did you ever feel like, oh no, what's happening? I can't, this is not what needs to happen. I need to work harder, or I'm giving up, or any of those thoughts? Or were you able to really trust that this was the process?
I didn't trust it right away, but I did over time realize that I had this process. Like everyone's process is going to look different. And, I listen to interviews with writers, and I've read about writing and read about people's processes, and realize that we have to discover our own. I just didn't think that mine would look like that. I
Uh-huh.
also thought that mine, being a meditation teacher, that mine would involve more meditation.
Hmm.
So in the very beginning, I was trying to meditate for 20 to 45 minutes before my writing, which is one of the reasons why I was getting up so early. And somewhere around the middle, I realized I needed to meditate for 5 minutes before I started writing, because I was sort of losing that morning lucidity. And I think that's a key part of understanding our writing process, is understanding what time of day we're really clear. I have a friend who is a writer who cannot write before 1 p.m. So
Interesting.
we really need to understand where our energy. I have a friend, Jocelyn K. Glay, who
Oh, I'm friends
runs.
with her too.
Oh, great! Yeah, so she runs that course Reset,
Yeah,
and she gifted me the course during my writing process, and that course really helped me realize, oh, I am an early bird. And some people are night owls, and some people get their energy in the middle of the day. That was really important to discern.
that's really helpful information. So it sounds like the process wasn't so much about procrastinating on what was happening, but really discovering what was going to work for you. I can imagine that it might be, I know when I've tried to get up early, and now I get up at 6 to start my day, but that's not my preferred time. I would, if I could do life my own way, it would be 8 o'clock, but I get up at 6 because I got to get things done. But for a while, it was really hard to get into that habit, to really set the alarm and get up, and not just one day or not just one week, but to actually make it something that was a habit. And I could say that I procrastinated on that, on creating that habit. I think that's a part of habit creation, though, perhaps. Did you have any resistance in that direction?
Um, I think I think it's really important to talk about habit creation. We're talking about writing or procrastination, because it's so hard, except for, a few weirdos who we all resent. But for most of us, habit creation is not an easy process. It's not just sort of this willpower strength that we can do on our own. The majority of us, another great resource that really helped me was Gretchen Rubin's The Four Tendencies, where she talks about our distinct tendencies and how we get motivated. And some of us can motivate internally, it sort of all comes from within, and we're also really good at being motivated externally. That's the smallest number of people. So those people who seem uber disciplined, and the majority of people actually get externally motivated, which means that they are motivated by accountability, by community, by connection. So for me, having my editor, before I got started with the formal writing process, we had a meeting to talk about what would be supportive. And I, knowing myself, said that, she was sort of like, I can be hands off and you can just check in with me in 10 months and see where you're at. And I was like, no, that will not be good for me. Like, I want to have to deliver 2 chapters to you every however many months.
Yeah, that seems smart.
Yes. And having my agent as part of that process to also be a check-in, to have friends who are also writing, at various stages of the writing process, people that I could check in with. That all was a really important part of dealing with my procrastination, which isn't about, procrastination is such a just general term for the varieties of ways that we need to create support or systems for us to be able to execute something, right? And that's like an internal knowing of yourself, what your patterns are, what kind of support you need, rather than thinking you are like morally deficient and some kind of failure because you can't do it all on your own.
Right. This isolated writer in a tower somewhere is it's not going to work. It sounds like you built a whole sphere of connections and safety nets and avenues of nourishment and all kinds of things around you in the process to make sure that you could work smoothly and not effortlessly, probably not effortlessly, it takes effort, but so like you could be in the process at least.
Yeah. And I never thought about it this way, but as you said that, kind of the writer in the tower, it's a really masculine and really kind of modern and white model of this kind of isolated individual writer who just kind of cranks it out. And what I was describing, as I described it, is much more just feminine feeling. And it's not about male, female, but just this energy of being receptive and connected and kind of softening around this like hard determination. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It really, really was. It was painful. There were many times where I never actually spent the advance money I got. I had it in my account because I was convinced almost until the end that I would have to give it back.
No. I hope you had some celebration when you handed in your manuscript.
I really did. Yeah. Yeah. But it's, it doesn't make it easy, but it at least, it at least removes all the kind of shame and blame around not being able to do it in a particular way.
I think that's really it, the shame and blame that gets expressed in different ways through people's process or resistance or the phantoms that it brings up. A lot of my clients are just starting to get into their projects right now, and there's this shadow side that comes up when they've said, okay, I want to do this. I'm committed to this project and it means a lot to me. And that's when suddenly you sit down to write and you find, oh my gosh, I'm getting up and, every 5 minutes I can't sit down and maintain a connection to it. There's something pushing back against it. There's something about doing something meaningful that also creates resistance. I've also never really understood that, but it's been true for myself and so many people. And and I think the key can be having connection, having community, having more of what is the word? Not an iterative process, but something where it's not one and done, but it's
like continually generative.
Yeah.
It's so it's always changing too in that way. And that was something else I didn't anticipate, how much I would be growing through the process. And of course, I had to hand in chapter outlines and sort of a trajectory for the book, which pretty much stayed the same. But um, my ideas were continually deepening and being shaped by my year, really, and just how I was changing and growing through life itself, but also through the process of writing.
Yeah, the process of writing a book is a transformative process.
It really is.
It's
Yeah.
profound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we come to that edge of shame and blame, like you were saying, and deal with it, or able to face it and deal with it, which is something like what happens in meditation. I mean, many things come up in meditation, but that's one thing that can come up: resistance, of negative feelings. And in your tradition, I believe you look at them, sit with them, look at them, allow them to change. Is that right? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, and just see change as the most natural process that we're in all the time. And um yeah, my meditation practice really supported me, and my spiritual practice really supported me. Every morning before I would write, I would light candles. I have an altar, and it includes an ancestor altar. And so to call on my mom and my grandmothers particularly, but all my ancestors to
Mm.
come in and support me, um, and really make it into a sacred process. You know, that also helped my ego get out of the way,
Mhm.
that to really believe that I had something meaningful to say that was coming through me, that wasn't mine really, but really, because I'm writing about belonging, because I'm writing about transformation, that it was a truth that I might be articulating, but I didn't invent it, right?
So you're really in two lineages. You're in the lineage of your family and that wisdom, and plus your lived wisdom, and then the lineage of your meditation lineage and your teachers who came before
Yeah,
that.
and that really something about that ritual every morning. And many writers have their talismans and their particular rituals, but I really found some like inspiration in it, but also solace, that I kind of didn't have to carry it all myself. And it's interesting because when you were speaking before about um, kind of taking on this process, I thought about how hard it is, depending on our conditioning, and how many women, how many people of color don't feel the same sense of entitlement. And I mean entitlement not pejoratively, but like really that we feel empowered and feel our power to execute something like a book or to put our voice out there. And it's been so documented and studied and researched, that imposter syndrome kind of reality that we live in. And so calling on my ancestors helped support that, so that it didn't have to be about just me overcoming all of this conditioning.
That's so powerful and so beautiful. I love that. I think when it's true and when it's bigger than us, beyond us, it can seem easier to carry and to do the work, because then it's not just oh, I have to be articulate and smart and organized, but I have a greater mission here. I think that's much more motivating when you
It's
have to
more
sit down.
motivating, and it's really, I think, more honest.
Yeah, that must feel
That,
really
yeah,
much better.
yeah.
When you, so you're going through edits, you're going through galleys. So galleys are the book is set in pages, but it hasn't been fully printed yet. And you're looking over changes, and we're in this changing time. Is there, in this process that's not the generative process, but the reviewing process, are you finding any different tendencies coming up now?
One thing I'm having to be careful about is there's so much happening with the pandemic and now with the uprisings that are related to so many of the themes of the book. And I can't put it all in. I do want to sort of connect to it. So I went back in with the first pass and talked about coronavirus in a few places that seemed relevant, but I really had to resist the temptation to like write a new ending or kind of try and address this current moment, and just trust that the book's themes and the book's attention to different matters will relate to what's going on now.
Yeah, it's such a changeful moment to have a book coming out, a book which is particularly set once it's published. That's how it exists. You can edit it, but not in a really big way. It's not like a blog post where you could write a new one or you could put in a different paragraph or something. So it must be tempting to put a lot of commentary in now, but we know that things are going to change next week. So it's
Exactly.
impossible to know like what would be the right ending since we're not at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, just really making sure that attention to detail is really about the proofreading, and dotting I's and crossing T's rather than trying to really change anything thematically.
Right. Keeping it local rather than global changes. Yeah, sometimes it can be hard to let go of things, and that's where the perfectionism can come in and be like, well, if I just said it this way, or maybe this way, or maybe that way, then it would be perfect, and it would go off into the unknown of your readers, go off into your readers' hands, and have the desired effect. But this is a moment where you're about to let it go and have its desired, whatever effect it's going to have. So any kind of attempt this is your last chance
Right.
to have
Right.
that kind of influence. It's interesting. Well, thanks so much for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know where this conversation would go, but it ended up being really interesting.
Yeah, for me too. And for those of you who want to know more about Seb or Seb's book, you can find more about her at sebeneselassie.com online, or Instagram, Sebene Selassie. And the book is called You Belong. It comes out August 27th, but you can pre-order it now on Indie Hub, right? Indie Hub, Amazon.
I think IndieBound.
IndieBound.
Yeah, and through your local bookstores
and Bookshop, which is a new book ordering engine that's the anti-Amazon. It's the Amazon alternative. But you can pre-order now. I've already pre-ordered my copy. I can't wait to get it. And I'm so excited to see what happens. And congratulations.
Thank you, Joelle. Thanks for all your support.
Yeah, thanks for being here.